There's a saying that folks will frequently repeat in Pakistan, and that is that some countries have an army, but in Pakistan, the army has a country. So for most things that matter, the most important foreign policy relationships with India, Afghanistan, China, Saudi Arabia, the United States, the army controls. The army controls, of course, defense policy. The army pretty much gets to dictate what percentage of the budget it gets. It never has to justify what percentage of the budget it demands. And it also dictates, to a considerable extent, domestic policies. When Pakistan and India became independent in 1947, in some sense, Pakistan did get a bum deal. India retained basically the architecture of the civil service, the architecture of the military. There had never been any history of governing Pakistan from Karachi. It was a brand new, it had been a provincial capital, but there had never been any history of governing this landmass from that territory. The Pakistan independence movement was led by the Muslim League, and the Muslim League did not have a grassroots standing in the places that became Pakistan. It was largely a political party that was based in North India. And they spoke a language that literally no one spoke in Pakistan. So when the Muslim League arrived and what became Pakistan, they had a choice between building the political party and building the state. And they ended up building the state because they couldn't do both. They had massive personnel shortages. In my book, I talk about Pakistan's an ideological state. And what it does is not driven by security. What it wants in Kashmir is an ideological argument that says we are a country for, of, and by Muslims. And we are in a civilizational competition with Hindu India. And they use this rhetoric of the two-nation theory in Pakistan schools. They talk about Hindu India not accepting Pakistan's existence. They describe every war with India as a war that India started, even though it's absolutely untrue. Pakistan has started every war. If Pakistan were not an ideological army, you could argue that economic normalization with India would be good for Pakistan, right? Because it would allow Pakistan's economy to grow. They could hold the percentage of their GDP constant in terms of the amount that they spend on the military, and still that amount will grow because their economy is growing. That's what a non-ideological state would do. They would seek some accommodation with India because it actually benefits the army's position if the army's sole job was to defend the nation. But the Pakistan Army's sole job isn't to defend the nation, it's to run the nation. And so if there were to ever to be any kind of peace with India, it would be very difficult for the Pakistan Army to justify this enormous footprint. The constant, per their own preferences, to come in and run indirectly and directly the country. The Army preeminently wants to protect its position to be the resource hog. And it basically expects that after it takes its piece of the budget, that the rest of the international community will just keep Pakistan afloat. And it does. The Pakistan Army is not irrational. It does exactly what works for it. And the international community does, in fact, do this because the Pakistan military has been able to cultivate this sense that we're too dangerous to fail. The sad thing is, most Pakistanis buy the bull. There isn't widespread protests. Whenever the military finds itself in trouble, it's very good at spreading conspiracy theories that this isn't our doing, it's India's doing, it's the United States doing, it's Israel's doing. And so they're very good at attenuating any kind of public criticism of what the army does. It's a self-licking ice cream cone. In recent decades, what Pakistan has also tried to do is use terrorism to retard India's rise. Pakistan views India as a hegemon. It views itself as the only country in the region that can resist India's rise. And this has given rise to other theaters of competition. So, for example, Afghanistan is a place where India and Pakistan are fiercely competitive. Lesser theaters would be Central Asia. Sri Lanka is another theater of Indo-Pakistan cooperation or competition. But the main issues are to reverse the territorial status quo in Kashmir and to resist India's rise through all means possible, really.